Franz Reichelt. There's a specific kind of bravery required to look at the laws of physics and say, "I disagree." Franz Reichelt possessed that bravery. In the early 20th century, aviation was in its infancy and it was deadly. Reichelt was a tailor by trade, a man who worked with fabric and thread, not steel and fuel. He was haunted by the stories of pilots dying because they had no way to escape a falling plane. He wanted to save them. He designed a wearable parachute, a suit that would allow a pilot to float gently to Earth. He called it the Vetemum parachute. After testing it with dummies, he felt he had no choice but to prove it himself. On February 4, 1912, he stood on the first deck of the Eiffel Tower. Footage of the event shows him hesitating for a long time. It wasn't just fear, it was the heavy burden of his conviction. He wasn't a stuntman, he was a creator who believed so deeply in his work that he bet his life on it. He jumped. The parachute failed to deploy. But we shouldn't remember him for the fall, we should remember him for the compassion that drove him up there, the desire to wrap a pilot in safety. William Bullock. We often think of dangerous inventions as rockets or explosives, but sometimes the danger lies in the mundane machinery that changed the world. William Bullock invented the rotary printing press in 1863. This wasn't just a machine, it was the internet of its day. It allowed information to flow faster than ever before, revolutionizing journalism and literacy. Bullock was a brilliant mechanic, but like many of us, he could be impatient when technology didn't cooperate. In 1867, he was installing a new press in Philadelphia. The drive belt kicked off the pulley. It was a simple annoyance. In a moment of frustration, or perhaps just muscle memory, he tried to kick the belt back onto the driving pulley. His leg was caught and crushed by the massive churning gears of his own creation. Gangrene set in, and he died during the operation to amputate the leg. It is a somber reminder that the machines we build to serve us have no loyalty, and even the most brilliant engineer is vulnerable to a split-second error. Thomas Midgley Jr. Thomas Midgley Jr. is a complicated figure in history, known for developing leaded gasoline and CFCs, inventions that had disastrous environmental consequences. However, his death was caused by a much more personal invention. Later in life, Midgley contracted polio, which left him severely disabled and confined to his bed. He was a man accustomed to using engineering to solve problems, so he refused to let his paralysis keep him stationary. He devised an elaborate system of ropes and pulleys, a hoist system that would allow him to lift himself out of bed without assistance. It was an invention born of a desire for dignity and independence. But on November 2, 1944, the device malfunctioned. He became entangled in the ropes of his own design and was strangled. It is a tragic irony that a man who altered the atmosphere of the entire planet was ultimately claimed by a simple machine built to give him a little bit of freedom within his own home. Henry Smolinski. The dream of the flying car is something almost everyone can relate to. We've all been stuck in traffic wishing we could just lift off and soar away. Henry Smolinski actually tried to make it happen. He wasn't a dreamer with a sketch pad, he was a trained engineer who had worked on jet aircraft. In 1973, he unveiled the AVE Mizar. It was a hybrid of a Ford Pinto and a Cessna Skymaster. The idea was brilliant in its utility. You would drive the car to the airport, bolt on the wings, and fly away. Upon landing, you'd leave the wings and drive home. It was meant to be the democratization of flight. On September 11, 1973, Smolinski took off for a test flight in California. Shortly after takeoff, a strut detached from the car, the wing folded, and the vehicle plummeted to the ground. Smolinski and his pilot were killed instantly. He died chasing a vision of the future that we still haven't quite mastered, proving that the gap between a car and a plane is much wider than it looks. Valerian Abakovsky. Valerian Abakovsky wanted to go fast. In the early days of the Soviet Union, the country was vast and the railways were the lifelines. Abakovsky, a young inventor, believed that the railway system was too slow for government officials who needed to travel across Russia. His solution was the Aerowagon. It looked like a monster, a train car fitted with an aircraft engine and a massive propeller on the front. It was designed to scream down the tracks at high speeds. In 1921, the Aerowagon successfully traveled from Moscow to Tula. It was a triumph. But on the return journey, at a speed of roughly 85 miles per hour, the Aerowagon hit a defect in the track and derailed. The crash killed Abakovsky and several foreign diplomats. He was only 25 years old. The invention was a metaphor for the era: high speed, high ambition, and a catastrophic collision with reality. Marie Curie. There are those who die because their invention fails, and then there's Marie Curie, who died because her invention worked too well. Curie didn't just invent a machine, she discovered elements of the universe, polonium and radium. She coined the term radioactivity. Her work earned her 2 Nobel Prizes and paved the way for X-rays and cancer treatments that save millions of lives today. But in the early 20th century, the dangers of radiation were unknown. She worked in sheds with poor ventilation, crushing chemicals, often carrying test tubes of radioactive isotopes in her pockets like they were precious stones. She was slowly poisoned by the very energy she discovered. She died in 1934 of aplastic anemia, a direct result of her long-term exposure to radiation. Her papers from the 1890s are still considered too dangerous to handle without protective gear. She is the ultimate example of the sacrificial pioneer. She gave her life to the light so that we could see in the dark. Max Valier. Max Valier is the reason we have reached the stars, but he never made it past the ground. A German physicist in the 1920s, he was obsessed with rocketry. While others were content with theory, Valier wanted to see propulsion in action. He helped create the Opal Rock program, creating rocket-powered cars, sleds, and even aircraft. He was a showman of science, strapping volatile explosives to vehicles to prove that rocket propulsion was the future of travel. Eventually, he moved on to experimenting with liquid-fueled rockets, which are far more efficient but also far more dangerous. In 1930, while working in his laboratory in Berlin, a rocket engine fueled by alcohol exploded on his test bench. A piece of shrapnel pierced his pulmonary artery, and he bled to death within minutes. He was the first casualty of the space age, a man who played with fire because he knew it was the only way to get humanity off the surface of the Earth. Alexander Bogdanov. Alexander Bogdanov was a man searching for the fountain of youth through science. A Russian physician, philosopher, and science fiction writer, he became obsessed with the idea of blood transfusion. This was the 1920s. The science of blood types and pathogens was not fully understood. Bogdanov believed that by transfusing the blood of young people into older bodies, he could suspend the aging process and perhaps achieve eternal life. He underwent 11 transfusions and actually claimed he felt younger and that his eyesight had improved. But his 12th transfusion was his last. He exchanged blood with a student who was suffering from malaria and tuberculosis. The student survived the procedure, but Bogdanov suffered a severe rejection reaction and died. It is a profound tragedy, a doctor driven by the desire to cure the ultimate disease, death itself, who ended up sacrificing his own life to save a student, proving that biology is far more complex than even the most brilliant mind can master. Otto Lilienthal. We tend to think of the Wright brothers when we think of flight, but they stood on the shoulders of Otto Lilienthal. Known as the Glider King, Lilienthal was the first person to make repeated successful gliding flights. He didn't just study aerodynamics, he lived them. He built artificial hills to launch himself off, flapping and gliding like a bird, taking over 2,000 flights. He brought the dream of human flight from fantasy into the realm of science. He proved that a heavier-than-air craft could be controlled, but on August 9, 1896, his glider stalled. He fell from a height of about 50 feet and broke his neck. He died the next day. His final words to his brother were reported to have been, "Sacrifices must be made." He wasn't speaking of other people's sacrifices, he was speaking of his own. He knew the sky exacted a price, and he paid it willingly so that humanity could eventually take wing.